Hi everyone. This is the reading of Block 1 of MEG03 program from MA English uh, course at IGNOU. This is Block 1 of MEG3, Henry Fielding, Tom Jones, and we will be reading Unit 3, that is Important Thematic Areas in Tom Jones. So let's start with it. The structure of this Unit 3 is objectives, then introduction, varieties of female representation from low to high strata, and the sub part of the 3.2 are Bridget as an intelligent user of skills, Molly Seagrim and Mrs. Waters, Lady Ballaston's degradation and vacuity, feelings, narrative strategies, role of the narrator, places as segments of life, the country, the road, the city, breadth of feelings realism. Let us sum up glossary and questions. I think we will not be going through glossary and questions, and we'll be just leaving it till let us sum up. So let's begin with 3.0, that is objectives. In this unit, I shall acquaint you with the complex nature of Tom Jones. Yes, we should first appreciate the way an author has represented what can be called the action of the novel. The way the author has allowed freedom to various meanings or significances so that they emerge in the novel on their respective strengths. I prefer to call these significances thematic areas. There are many important themes in Tom Jones, such as religious, ethical, and moral. You can further expand the scope of the discussion and bring socio historical developments within its ambit. I say this because Fielding is more than a novelist or a literary writer. He is a social commentator, and historical analyst. This is clear not merely from the prefatory chapters he has added to each book in the novel, but also the manner in which he has remarked about the behavior of characters in specific situations. I plan here to focus more upon the behavior of characters in situation in which they find themselves. 3.1 Introduction. In the previous unit, we saw the particular equation of benefactor beneficiary, teacher pupil, or at the best father son between Mr. Allworthy and Tom. As we noted, Mr. Allworthy came across as a repository of wisdom and Tom as an eager though inconsistent learner of it. We also saw that there always remained a great distance between the two at the level of communication. How about Tom vis-a-vis other character? I think I've been pronouncing this a little wrong, so let's look up.
Vis-a-vis.
Vis-a-vis. Okay.
Vis-a-vis.
Vis-a-vis. How about Tom vis-a-vis other characters? I took up this question in the context of Tom's relationship with Squire Western. The former, an innocent, fun loving, vivacious youth of dubious birth, and the latter, a member of landed gentry, the high and mighty section of the society in 18th century England. Traditionally, this section had its own view of alliances. We begin this unit with the consideration of women characters in the novel. 3.2 Varieties of female representation from low to high strata. We are struck by great variety of women characters in the novel. It is indeed surprising how Fielding assigns such clear and distinctive traits to each one of them. He must have had a large fund of social experience to draw upon, and a keen eye to set apart one type of female existence from another. I say this because, unlike men who have a share in the power structure at different levels in the world of the novel, women have to be largely restricted to their sexuality. 3.2.1 Bridget as an intelligent user of skills. As noted above, Bridget Allworthy, in spite of her superior social status, is wooed, a mild form of being sexually approached, by the number of people at different points of time. She is not good looking. Still, marriage with her can be planned by aspirants such as Captain Bilfill and the Senior Bilfill. Squire and Thwackum too consistently try to win favor with her. What is clear is that these four have always hoped to attain money or power through sexually exploiting and, more pertinently, subjugating her. Bridget knows it quite well and thinks of using it to further her own ends. A quite legitimate way in circumstances to use her position as a woman. In Fielding's view, so discreet was she in her conduct that her prudence was much on the guard, as if she had all the snares to apprehend which were laid for her whole sex. She cleverly manipulates the philosopher and the clergyman and reduces the two to the level of abject seekers of sexual favors. We should not forget that it is Bridget who is the first woman in the novel to violate the code of matrimonial sanctity, by which her great brother swears so much, and gives birth to a bastard who, as we see, raises her role of committing every new violation of sexual matrimonial code to a different level altogether. And ironically, the dead Bridget has had her way in the end in so many different senses. She is able to do so largely because social privilege protected her from crude encroachment by any of the males. Also, she is less gullible because of the superior upbringing and education than other women in the novel. Be that as it may, we are presented through her and with an attitude of counter violation of all suppressing patriarchal code by a woman. This planned act of negation by her can be appreciated comically and heroically. 3.2.2 Molly Seagrim and Mrs. Waters. Molly Seagrim attracts the reader's attention more compellingly as a symbol of aggressive female sexuality. Fielding seems to be deriving a great deal of fun from her depiction. But the daughter of comedy is seldom at her cost. But the laughter of comedy is seldom at her cost. Instead, he clearly upholds Molly as a powerful symbol of human vigor and raw sexual power. Molly has none of the prudish, hypocritical sense of chastity of which Fielding accused the heroines of the Richardson's novels. In fact, Fielding visualizes Molly in excessive animalistic terms. It occurs to us later that this wild, unrestrained, almost overflowing sexuality becomes in the novel a sharp comment on Lady Palmerston's behavior. Promiscuous behavior. We see Lady Bellaston planning her affairs cynically with different men on the strength of skills and homework. In the latter's case, in the latter's case, sexuality changes into a sick, routinized behavior. Tom himself loses much of his dynamism and gusto as he interacts with her. Her morally debilitating, debilitating debilitating influence upon Tom Her morally debilitating influence upon Tom is comprehended quite well by Sophia herself. This is reflected in her certain rejection of Tom till things reveal themselves in a radically different light at the end. Mrs. Waters offers yet another variety of female behavior. She has a long history of sexual and social harassment. The two harassments can't in fact be separated, but we discern in her a distorted sense of values regarding relationships. Perhaps her affair with Captain Waters, a military officer with no rootedness in settled existence, has left an indelible mark upon her, a mark of easy utilitarian relationship. Any new male can catch Mrs. Waters' fancy, and a series of such happenings may eventually land her in a hopelessly shocking situation. On the surface, we may note a few similarities between Mrs. Waters and Tom in their attitude to sexual morality, but a close look would reveal that, insofar as their relationship between the two is concerned, Tom is an object of seduction to which he undoubtedly succumbs rather easily, while Mrs. Waters is the seducer. More, we have seen Tom behaving innocently in all situations, unlike Mrs. Waters, who can't be called innocent. Fielding's purpose seemed to be uh, to confront the reader with disastrously unsettling idea of incest at later stage. In fact, we do not become entirely free from the horror of Tom having possibly gone to bed with his own mother. In this case, chance only helps, but chance or no chance, the situation is such, with Tom's recklessness and lack of serious perspective and Mrs. Waters' worse than immoral ways, we have to distinguish between the two, that the protagonist of the novel might as well be his mother's partner in sex. Still, more than chance, it is omnipotent narrator who rejects the option and decides to make the novel an epic and therefore pull Tom out the possibility of incest. If the author's decision were to make the work a tragedy, the novel would be a repetition of Oedipus. I think I will just look up the word. Okay. Hmm. Can't really look. So this is Oedipus. I think.
Oedipus.
Oedipus. Yes. Novel would be a repetition of Oedipus, but that is not the genre to which Tom Jones belongs in its basic spirit and attitude. However, Mrs. Waters helps us to see the enormity of unscrupulous sexuality. It becomes crude and excessive in her case with the passage of time. In this way, the purpose behind introduction of Mrs. Waters in the novel is not merely to contribute to the complexity of the plot, but to offer another variant of female behavior. With its help, we can judge the inanity of Mrs. Fitzwater, whose sob story appears episodic and narrow in scope, as well as the cynical disregard for ethics and scruples behind Lady Bellaston's well orchestrated operations. Lady Bellaston's degradation and vacuity. Fielding considers Lady Bellaston in the strictly moral terms and find her deficient in nature as well as education. She is presented as actively participating in masquerades where the men and women of the upper stratum of society entertain themselves. The scene is typically 18th century and reflects a growing growing amount of laxity in morals among people in higher London circles. When Tom, innocent as he is exposed to this atmosphere, he does not see the moral degradation and vacuity underlying it. On her part, Lady Bellaston is struck by the looks of Tom and plans to keep him as her lover. A cool player of games in fashionable London, Lady Bellaston employs clever stratagems to keep Tom away from Sophia and uses her social standing as well as money to ensure that he remains firmly in her grip. However, there is one aspect of her personality in which this is the projection of Lady Bellaston is questioned in the novel. Here, I refer to Lady Bellaston's inherent fears as an insecure woman in the presence of Sophia's sweet and dignified ways. Lady Bellaston is highly individualistic, self centered, and mean. We hardly see any idealism or moral sense left in her. On the other hand, Sophia is driven by a superior sense of love. We perceive an intense urge in her to self question. Sophia is torn apart between her lover and filial duty. These things have all along remained alien to Lady Bellaston. In this clash of values, Lady Bellaston is bound to lose. The presence of superior sensibility has made her still more jealous of a woman totally reassured of winning Tom's love. The sense of jealousy in Lady Bellaston points toward the whole boredom of stagnant life, the particular social formation into which the upper stratum of English society has fallen, and which denies its women the pleasure of being honestly and loyally related to the members of opposite sex. If we look back from the scenes of London life to the way people went about their business in Somersetshire, we realize that high and mighty as well as the poor and helpless remain firmly rooted in a life of relative stability and honesty there. On the other hand, London atmosphere is too cynical and cold to allow simple pleasure of natural give and take. Lady Bellaston becomes acutely aware of the growing loneliness and uncertainty in her existence as a woman. This is specifically caused by her watching Tom as totally absorbed in the thought of joining with his beloved Sophia. The only way Lady Bellaston can assert herself in the situation is to thwart the efforts of the two lovers to join each other. Where does the novel come to an end? In the book 17th or 18th? It is again a difficult question to answer. Fielding seems to be keeping the two options open and inviting the reader to make his or her own choice. Looking at the novel from a close realistic angle, words such as convincing, acceptable, logical come to mind in association with the realistic. We feel that Tom has become too helpless and weak. He cannot fight the whole structure single handed to even wriggle out of the situation in given circumstances. The logic of events in the novel strongly suggests that Tom is destined to fail, which in his specific case means losing Sophia as well as the connections with Mr. Allworthy. This points towards this points towards the likely success of Billfield's sinister plans, who operates in the novel in the manner of fate, out to systematically destroy Tom's prospects of fulfillment at the end of his journey. The narrator says as much in the 17th book and calls Tom's situation desperate, but this kind of realism does not seem to go well with the spirit of the novel. Instead, Fielding sets much store by the comic approach, which stresses the vital significance of the human intervention moved by the urge to change. It is this urge and attitude which inspires the narrator to continue into 18th book and tell the reader confidently that Tom and Sophia were not born to fail. 3.3 Fielding's narrative strategies. 3.3.1 Role of the narrator. I shall discuss at length the question of narration in a separate unit. This is essential since the importance of this fictional device is immense. However, a brief comment is necessary here. I see a kind of omnipotence in the narrator of Tom Jones. He can do whatever he wants to. He can, for instance, give a specific direction to the course of events and influence decisions of characters. More, he can defend his actions with the force of argument. This serves a useful purpose in the novel and compels us to think about the identity of the protagonist. Normally, the author is himself the narrator. However, we come across many authorial comments that are to be accepted by the reader as such as those other where the author talks tongue in cheek. The problem is further compounded when we see the narrator at work, not in the sense that he narrates a saga, but he creates a saga after his own liking and judgment, and narrates it in the very process of creating it. The author himself combines this kind of a role in Tom Jones. Still, as the action unfolds, we see a distancing between narrator and author as well as the creator and the author. This has happened because the history called Tom Jones has been conceived in the broadest possible comic mold. A serious analyst and commentator wearing a comic mask has taken upon himself to create a history according to the law of probability and convenience. Nay, this serious comic voice does not accept any discipline for itself and in fact rides roughshod on territories of morality, religion, ethics, love, beauty, carnal pleasures, meanness, etc. Those who see the narrator as the author himself would face the difficulty of proving that the whole unfolded drama. Those who see the narrator as the author himself would face the difficulty of proving that the whole unfolded drama in the novel can be no more than extension of Fielding's consciousness, that the unifying element in the novel is the author's understanding. This goes against the clash of perspectives in the novel, with Fielding not willing or being able to provide coherence to a number of discordant voices. Tell me, who is who is right or wrong? Mrs. Waters, Allworthy, Bridget, Tom. What I think that the totality of the novel constitutes a dramatic interplay between various parts, and these parts have an existence independent of author's consciousness. Yes, in the absolute sense, the serious comic narrator has been conceived and created by the author, but once that has taken place, the narrator has begun influencing and determining the course of happenings unrestrained by the author. If we do not accept the concrete existence of the narrators in the Tom Jones, we would be hard put to comprehend those points in the novel's progress where things stop moving. We notice that wherever this happens, the narrator butts into the merely explaining many things, but events, arguments, situations, chance happenings, and even total reversal of fortune. The narrator never fights shy of taking the blame for such interventions and bravely moves on to tell the unbelievable things. And the joke is practiced invariably under the pretext of history. I feel that the serious analyst and the commentator has withdrawn himself many a time from behind the mask, or, to put it differently, allowed the mask to be peculiarly shaped by the comic intention. Most of the voices, then, are masks. In either case, Fielding, the author, seemed to watch helplessly the moment of action. The movement of the action. 3.3.2 Places as segments of life, the country, the road, the city. An important thematic aspect of the novel is the division of life in segments. These particular representations bear the stamp of the place to which they belong. Together, these concrete segments bring to the life the whole diversity as well as interrelatedness of 18th century English life. As a faithful observer of contemporary situations, Fielding's, Fielding presents the true picture of his surroundings, doing it with the intensity and passion of a creator of history. There are three distinct places in the novel: Somersetshire, the road, the path, towns, and villages spread over the distance between Somersetshire and London, and the city of London. As far as Tom is concerned, these three represent distinct phases in his development. For instance, Somersetshire stands for a dull and stagnated existence. In spite of the two learned men, Square and Thwackum, who interpret situations specifically, the place has been managed and governed since a long time by narrow perception and belief. Magistrate Allworthy uses his intellectual might just to help people out of errors they commit. Square Western quarrels and socializes with neighbors on the basis of ordinary principles. The common people, men and women, fight it out in physical terms whenever a disagreement between them take place. Others steal or snatch. If chance permits, they also cheat. Among the clever ones, Pilfil mixes the truth and the lies to the good effect so that he can outwit the best of men. But what we largely see is a pattern under which the movement is circular. You come back to the point from where you started. I draw your attention to Sophia's mother who married the wrong man. The daughter Sophia is also going to marry a wrong man, Blifil, under circumstances that are essentially similar. To think of another detail, Patridge, the supposed father of Tom, is constrained to leave the place, and Joan is equally well forced to run away from it. This place also strongly suggests that the movement and the liberation lies elsewhere, though Tom and Sophia, who run away with this consciousness, do not know where and how exactly they can attain deliverance. What is certain is that Somersetshire holds no hope. The second place, the road, stresses Tom's need to move and explore. The road also gives Tom scopes to reach another place where joining with his beloved may be possible. It holds our hope. On her part, Sophia becomes gradually aware of the value of marriage with a person gifted with natural goodness. This road is rough and difficult, both literally and metaphorically, but it is here the action is. There is no place better than the road to present the vibrant light of life of 18th century England. Fielding gives us a rare view of people on the move. The reader sees the soldiers going to fight for causes that may determine the political nature of the country. But these soldiers, in the amorphous military formation, behaves as individuals with whom the common reader can easily identify and whom our hero joins for a short period. In fact, Tom thinks for a while to become a soldier. The only difficulty with him is that a career in the military will take him away from his another destination, Sofia. Fielding persists with the depiction of fights, journeys, escapes, etc. In the Man of the Hill episode also, we can imagine too the variety of social life that the England of 18th century contained. The innkeepers, travelers in stagecoaches, doctors, priests, barbers, and or gypsies making merry in the secluded part away from the road. The road, as a phase of Tom's search and exploration, as mentioned above, is not smooth or straight and can give unexpected jolts to the traveler. The City of London offers a radically different picture. There is life, all right, but no movement, apart from that which is noticed on the surface. The world of intrigue and scandal is seen to engulf everyone. We also perceive a conflict between the country square, Allworthy Western, and the Lord Fellamar in London. For Western, it is unthinkable to have Lord Fellamar as son in law, the two words of the status and privilege of the countryside and the city being in the state of antagonism. As Lady Bellaston and Lord Fellamar became active to tame and ensnare Sophia, one feels that there is no chance whatsoever of Sophia and Tom uniting. Here, Fielding raises the question of Tom's efficacy as a hero struggling for survival in an atmosphere fraught with threats and dangers. Still more serious is the issue that contending groups converge upon London, a world which itself is quite crisis ridden, to find a solution to their problems. As we have discussed elsewhere, the City of London makes the possibility of comedy extremely narrow as the fighting faculties of Tom gradually decline. 3.3.3 The breadth of Fielding's realism. It is easier in the case of Tom Jones than the most other English novels to move out of the presented situations. The narrator remains insistent that the Tom Jones is not a fictional work but history. The division of description into three clear parts takes us into the manner in which the countryside and the city coexisted and reflected upon each other. Coexistence is a weak word since the relationship between the two social segments was anything but kind and peaceful. The metaphor of the city in Tom Jones signifies a moribund life mode, and the sooner it is replaced or wiped out by the country, Tom Sophia intervention, the better. The writer could not adopt a harsher attitude toward the social setup of his time. Understandably, it evoked a violent response. Fielding's sense of realism stands further enhanced by his view of countryside, which, as he sees it, contained a large amount of natural and spontaneous. In spite of this, Fielding offers a thorough-going critique of the good as well as the negative characters in the countryside by persistently presenting them as targets of ridicule or irony. He does not seem to sufficiently show that vigor and zeal of the simple people can see the society through. In many cases, Fielding understands the ills and evils of the Somerset to be entirely insurmountable. The road has more political aspect to it as against the social. Here, the current of life is stronger. Rebellion by section of society and the effort of others to quell it is a constant point of reference. What England seems to need is check on the lawlessness, but in Fielding's views, this check should contain in large measure the support of the common people. Tom's gusto is quite akin to Molly's. Fielding's prescription is not narrowly literary, an entertainment through fiction that makes the reader aware of the follies, ills, and evils of human behavior through deployment of technique. This is what the most English and American criticism is preoccupied with. Instead, the prescription is political, because of which Tom Jones shocked the 18th century reader. If Johnson tended to reject it as immoral and vicious, he did so because he understood it as going against the established norms. For Johnson, these forces were of morality and decency in life. From here, we move on to the higher plane of social history. The novel is not merely Tom's story but history. Tom signifies the emergence of the new group of people in the 18th century English society. This group took independent positions and enjoyed critiquing, critiquing, critiquing and rejecting whatever obstructed its social progress. The group had an outlook of optimism and constructive intervention. This approach marked the behavior of characters such as Tom and Sophia, who were enlightened and modern in the true sense of the word. However, Fielding finds the scope of their onward journey in the novel rather difficult. We see in the novel a fine interplay of actual, fearsome condition on one side and individual intervention on the other. We should also not lose sight of the fact that human initiative may not succeed necessarily. The energy and the dynamism of individuals is to be tempered by a great deal of wisdom. One way of successfully countering the challenge of orthodoxy and social stagnation is to evolve an alternative strategy of action. Nurture is to play an important part in this strategy, meaning thereby that people like Molly, Patridge, Mrs. Miller, and Mrs. Waters have to be left behind in the favor of those who would acquire genuine moral superiority through intellectual daring and economic power. Fielding is strong Fielding is strongly convinced of this. 3.4 Let us sum up. Fielding in Tom Jones plays the important role of presenter who not only knows all but also controls the action. From time to time, Fielding as narrator steps forward to put across a view. The strength of this representation is that he allows his narrator to comment on questions and issues and as also to change the perception of characters at crucial junctures. Men and women in the novel's territory have freedom to move about freely, but also under the critical gaze of author narrator. The act of grasping and determining situation in such fiction is broadly done through author's attitude. In the case of Tom Jones, the criticism offered is sharp and tone adopted is playful and comic. The range of view and comment being vast and all-embracing, we realize that the most vital areas of English life of the century have been significantly dealt with. Arnold Kettle has rightly remarked in his introduction to English novel that Fielding's own social attitudes evoke a response remarkably precise and controlled. It is with English society at large that he is primarily concerned, and between the large panorama, this general interest, and ourselves, Fielding himself stands larger, more insistent than any of his creation, directing our attention, controlling our reactions. Tom Jones may help us reflect upon the hypocrisy and callousness of societies, nations, and regimes in the modern world and inspire the reader to fearlessly critique them through the word and action. Most of the criticism coming from the Western countries seems to willfully overlook this aspect. This practice of academic criticism, quite rampant in cultural centers today, clouds our understanding of such fictional classics such as Tom Jones. Our job as students and teacher is to struggle for fresh our job as students and teacher is to struggle for a fresh human-centered perspective. More than others, Fielding needs to be rescued from such vastly influential considerations as plot structure, irony, and artistic authenticity.